So every Canadian would get a Class A share in the CBC. It would be privatized and cut off from government funding. And you guys, the shareholders, would then elect a board of directors, and the board of directors would hire the management team to manage the CBC, and it would have to become profitable or die. And you guys, as the Canadians, as the shareholders, would decide what to do with the CBC. So, and the other, as far as CTV Global, any others that are receiving subsidies from government, I would legislate an end to that, because like you say, and you guys understand that better than anybody at Rebel News, your job is to investigate us. Anybody that gets into politics, or business people as well. If there's corruption going on at any level, that's the job of the media, to expose that. Nothing like sunlight to get rid of infections, or corruptions, right? So to me, it's about getting rid of any subsidies whatsoever to any news media outlets by the government. That's what I pledge I would be doing.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News, and we're on location in Airdrie, Alberta, where a new approved candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, Joseph Bourgault, is in town for an event. He is very much an underdog, but one with some interesting perspectives that may draw votes from people with freedom-oriented votes and from social conservatives as well. He's also garnered the endorsement of a Canadian gold medal Olympian, as well as Stanley Cup champion and former Calgary Flame, Theo Fleury, so that is sure to draw some eyes to his bid for the leaderships. We will actually be speaking to both of them for exclusive interviews tonight here in Airdrie to learn why they feel that Mr. Bourgault is the best choice for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada in our latest leadershipreports.ca coverage.
It's appropriate that I'm interviewed by Rebel News. Rebel.
Yeah, you got it. Rebel at heart.
Yeah. I've been following you guys, so I appreciate all you guys have done to seek truth and stand up for truth and freedom and justice. And 100% with you guys.
Appreciate that very much. Yeah. Thanks. I'm now joined for an exclusive interview by Conservative Party of Canada leadership hopeful Joseph Bourgault. Joseph, I wanted to get into, first of all, effectively a congratulations. Your bid, we've just learned, for this candidacy has been approved today, so you're now an official candidate. I believe you declared your intention to run March 9th. Now you've come a long way, approved today. What's the energy been like around your campaign so far?
Well, it's been great, really. I love people, and I love meeting all the great people that I've been meeting along the way. In particular, I've been standing up for truth, freedom, and justice all my life, and in particular, the last 2.5 years, I've had to do more of the normal, and so I'm meeting a lot of those types of folks. Yeah, folks like Rebel News, who believe in honesty and integrity, are in pursuit of truth. And so I'm meeting a lot of great people. And so I love it, actually, And so today's a great day because I'm officially a candidate. I've been approved by the Conservative Election Committee, and I'm very grateful to them for that.
So one of the sort of points, I'm sure, when you're talking to people that is very much resonating is your team has committed that they would effectively end all COVID-19 mandates. Can you talk about that a little bit? Some of the comments made in this video by an approved Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate are apparently not kosher under the rules of YouTube. So if you want to see this full video, you're going to have to go to rebelnews.com, or as always, you can click the link in the description below.
And to me, I'm a believer. I believe that God gave us free will and freedom, and no government has a right to take our freedoms away from us the way they did. But then, of course, if you don't believe in that freedom comes from God, as apparently the people who are in power now don't believe that, so they feel they're God and they can usurp those authorities. So it's up to us as Canadians to stand up for our God-given rights and freedoms, and to stand up for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the criminal code. Even the Criminal Code of Canada has been violated by these governments.
So one of the sort of sentiments that we're hearing out there lots, whether it comes to protesters or these truck convoys, is that, well, the mandates are now over, and there's very much an effort to vilify anyone still protesting. But the fact remains, and this is part of sort of your platform, that people lost their jobs, never received severance, have lost their livelihoods, and are suffering. What would you do if elected leader, if eventually made prime minister of the country, to address those concerns for those people who have lost everything and not received anything as compensation?
Yeah, there's a few things there. One is there would have never been the lockdowns. Dr. Peter McCullough said that for the people, and I believe we should be accurately tracking those injuries and deaths. And so, yeah, those are some of the things I'd be doing.
Moving on from COVID-19, but something that certainly is on the same vein of government overreach, government control, government invasion of privacy. You've mentioned that you are overtly opposed to digital ID. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I'm 100% opposed to any government attempting to track people. You know, that's what happens when you have an ego mindset where you're God and you think that you can play God and track people, and if they don't smile right or do what you want them to do, you can just shut off their electronic wallet, if you will. Yeah. So I don't trust governments, and I don't think government should ever be structured in such a manner that government should ever be able to control your lives, your God-given rights and freedoms. And so I'm 100% opposed to a digital ID.
One of the other sort of concerns that we saw throughout all of this, particularly under the Trudeau government, is the evaporation of healthcare workers and physician-conscious rights. You want to stand up for those people, whether it be for religious reasons, personal reasons, just what they think is best for their patient. You think doctors and healthcare workers should have a right to exercise their conscience when they're working?
Well, yeah, this is what's causing the disunity in the country. When you try to govern in a way to force people, when you violate, my value system is pretty simple. God, love, truth, freedom, and personal responsibility, justice, and fairness. God loves truth, freedom, and justice. And so when we govern in that manner, in alignment with the way the Creator created us to live, He gave us freedom. And so when you live in alignment with those principles, you avoid all the chaos and the harm that has come as a result of what these governments, all of these governments have been doing to Canadians, including violating their charter rights and freedoms, like doctors and nurses. It's like we have an iron curtain around our country, It's crazy what's going on. It's outrageous.
Another sort of iron curtain that we have, particularly around Alberta, is the Trudeau government's adversity to Canadian, particularly Albertan oil and energy. I wanted to ask just generally, firstly on the carbon tax, and secondly on environmental policy, broadly speaking, what would that look like if you were in charge?
Well, the number one thing as far as policy goes is number one thing we would do is get rid of all mandates. Stop violating the Charter rights and freedoms, the Canadian Bill of Rights, and the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 3461, extortion. So that would be number one. Regarding the carbon taxes, they would go as well. I'm a manufacturer, and as a manufacturer, I'm competing with every other country in the world. Okay? And so what the carbon taxes have done, because Canada imposed carbon taxes that the US doesn't have, China doesn't have, India doesn't have. So all that this government has done, and I can understand it because Trudeau has no business sense whatsoever and not a lot of common sense and really can't do the math. What the carbon taxes are doing is driving inflation. I see today it's announced that our inflation is over 6% now, and a lot of that is fuel driven by the attack on the energy sector in this country and by the carbon taxes. So I would get rid of them immediately. That would be one of the top things. Here's what happens when you have carbon taxes. You make the cost of doing business in Canada more expensive. So what happens is businesses start manufacturing in China. Canada produces 1.5% of the world's CO2 emissions. China produces 28% of the world's CO2 emissions. Only 9% of our electricity in Canada is coal-fired, and it's some of the cleanest burning coal-fired power plants in the world. China's over 60% of their electricity is coal-fired. So when you shift the manufacturing over to China, where their coal-fired power plants are way dirtier than ours, what you do is you actually increase the amount of pollution overall in the world. But it's understandable because Justin Trudeau just doesn't get it.
And speaking of Justin Trudeau and inflation, which you mentioned, what would you do to correct or ameliorate the situation with this absolutely devastating for the middle class inflation we're facing?
Well, getting rid of the carbon taxes is one thing that would help. It would begin to reduce inflation. The second thing that I'd be doing is getting rid of the vax mandates, because that's creating labor shortages and it's creating supply management issues. And the other thing that I would be doing is increasing the basic personal exemption from $12,000. The current federal exemption for every Canadian citizen is $12,000. What I want to do is raise that to $50,000 because that's much closer to the true poverty line. And the true poverty line is the equivalent of the point of profitability for the individual. And we don't tax a business before it's profitable. So why on earth would we tax our citizens before they're profitable? This is just simple common sense. It's mathematics. And so I would make it so every Canadian could afford a healthy diet and lifestyle to prevent sickness and disease. So I want to create a true healthcare system by reforming the tax system. The other thing that I would do is I would allow income splitting for married couples up to $100,000 and a $20,000 deductible per child. So every Canadian could afford to live, afford to be healthy, afford to be happy, afford to have children, and that's how we're going to get our economy going as well.
Media holding politicians is one of the sort of central tenets of any civilized democracy. Unfortunately, in this modern state, we are seeing most media outlets, all mainstream media outlets, basically subject to the criteria of the government and receiving handouts, ultimately providing a conflict of interest. You're not likely to criticize the person who you are getting paid by. So what would you do to ameliorate the situation of media accountability and to address the problems with state-funded mainstream media?
Well, with the CBC, what I've been saying, all subsidies would go. I'm saying it outright. I believe that we have to privatize the CBC. I don't want to defund the CBC because there's billions of dollars in assets there, and as a businessman, that's crazy. What we have to do is privatize the CBC, and I want you and every other Canadian to have a Class A share, given you already own it. So every Canadian would get a Class A share in the CBC. It would be privatized and cut off from government funding. And you guys, the shareholders, would then elect a board of directors, and the board of directors would hire the management team to manage the CBC. And it would have to become profitable or die. And you guys, as the Canadians, as the shareholders, would decide what to do with the CBC. So, and the other, as far as CTV Global, any others that are receiving subsidies from government, I would legislate an end to that because like you say, and you guys understand that better than anybody at Rebel News, your job is to investigate us. Anybody that gets into politics or business people as well. If there's corruption going on at any level, that's the job of the media, to expose that. Nothing like sunlight to get rid of infections, or corruptions, right? So to me, it's about getting rid of any subsidies whatsoever to any news media outlets by the government. That's what I pledge I would be doing.
I also wanted to ask you, talk about creating this culture of life that is very often a contentious issue. There are some candidates who profess to be pro-life, but wouldn't necessarily bring that into office. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, I have been pro-life all my life. I've been a member of Campaign Life Coalition since '96. I've met with them and they've educated me on some of the issues surrounding. And so I'm a big, I support, here's one of the big things that's happening to explain this. So there's two things I want to mention. One of the ways that we're going to create a pro-life culture is by raising the basic personal exemption to the true poverty line. And we're going to allow income splitting for married couples. And we're going to allow a deduction of $20,000 per child. So this way, what people would naturally want to do, however many children you would want to naturally have, you will be able to afford to do that. So that's one way we're going to create a pro-life culture. The tax system is a real problem. And here's the other thing that the tax system has been doing in our country. In 1950, the cost of living for a single adult, I'm estimating here, I really need to do a little bit of homework on this, but for a single adult to live at the true poverty line in 1960, I'm guesstimating it would have been around $6,000. So back in 1960, or let's go to 1950, here's the statistic that I have. In 1950, for every 1,000 people in our country, the birth rate was 27 children. Today, it's for every 1,000 people, it's 10. So we've reduced our birth rate by 67%. So our tax system has effectively driven our labor force to nothing. And so we've got no labor force anymore. When I was a kid growing up, families typically were 5, 6, 7. in our neighborhood, 2 of the families were 10 children. And so we had a labor force. But because of our tax system, we no longer have a labor force. And if we want to get our country growing, it's essential that we reform the tax system to allow parents to have children, to raise healthy, happy children again. And so that's how I want to create a pro-life culture.
And finally, I just wanted to ask you, there are a number of sort of front runners, Pierre Poilievre, Dr. Leslie Lewis, to name a few. What would you say is your primary thing that distinguishes you? What would be your message to people out there who are maybe on the fence and maybe are seeing this interview that you're the right man for the job?
Well, I've been in business all my life since I was 18 years old and sooner. I really started working as an entrepreneur when I was 7 years old. So unloading dray every Saturday for 25 cents back in 1963. So I've worked all my adult life. I ended up in leadership positions in my father's company back when I was 18 years of age. And I helped my father and my brothers and all the talented people that worked in my dad's company, FB Bourgault Industries. I was appointed to an executive leadership position in 1985. And so 37 years I've been growing and building teams of people. And so I worked with large groups of people, helped to grow companies, helped to meet payroll, helped to balance budgets. I know what a balanced budget looks like. The budget doesn't balance itself. You have to grow your revenues and control your costs. So as a businessman, I understand how to grow an economy. In our community, I'm one of, my brothers played really critical roles, so I don't want to take an undue amount of credit, but I contributed to job creation in our community and in St. Brew. The largest employers, my brother Jerry's company, Bourgault Industry, they employ over 700 or 800 people. My company employs about 75 or 80 people, and my brother Claude's company employs about the same amount. And so this is in a community of 700 people. Yeah. So I understand job creation, and I understand the tax policies that are necessary to get our country growing so that we can create an abundance of jobs in the country. And so that's what I see that as critical. My business skills, when I see people getting into office who have never grown a business, have never balanced the budget or made payroll, who as young people go straight into office, they've never managed crises in their life. They don't have the life skills. Further, I recovered from a life-threatening illness. So I spent 8 years, 1984 to 1992, looking for answers as to what was causing my life-threatening health challenges, what became life-threatening. And I had to apply my research skills. I couldn't find the answers in the conventional medical care system. I had to apply my research skills to discern the truth as to what was causing my health problems. I did that, and I studied natural health and healing for the past 30 years. Owned a health food store, help people recover from all kinds of illness. So I have a wide variety of life skills, problem-solving skills that not many people have. So.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking this time to speak with us. We'll certainly be covering any other visits that you may come into town. Last word to you.
Yeah, one question you asked I didn't answer was on the environmental issue. I'm as passionate about growing our economy as I am about the environment. I have a record of environmentalism. I've supported good environmental causes. I worked for 4 years, invested a lot of time and energy to protect the lake from environmental pollution, and managed to do that. Had to sue the provincial government in Saskatchewan and the federal government in order to protect the lake because they were allowing laws to be violated that could have destroyed our lake. So I have an environmental track record. And I think that we can grow our economy and protect our environment at the same time. The stronger the oil and gas sector is in Alberta, the more profitable it is, the more it can invest in the technologies to clean up the environment. And so to me, I think win-win. That's pursuit of truth is win-win. It's not win-lose. The Liberals don't have those skills. The NDP don't have those leadership skills, and so they're doing what they understand, and they don't understand business, and they don't understand how to protect the environment.
Well, it certainly was great to be able to sit down with Conservative leadership hopeful Joseph Bourgault, ask him some serious questions, some questions you no doubt would like to hear the answers to, and we'd love to sit down with some of the other candidates and have long-form interviews like this already. We've already had the chance to speak with Leslyn Lewis as well. We'll also have another video coming out on this event. It was a long event where we talked to Thurin Fleury, had an extensive interview with him as well about why he's supporting Joseph Bourgault and some of the other people who showed up to support this event. So look forward to that next video, which will be coming out soon, and I hope you enjoyed this interview. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Once again, we saw virtually no other media coming out covering these events. We're very often the only people on the ground. So if you want to make sure you don't miss a thing, and not just from the front-runner candidates, but all the candidates in this leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada, make sure you go to leadershipreports.ca.